Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. I'd like to take a moment today, listeners, and thank you for all the hard work you've done for us in sharing our posts, liking our videos, and just listening to our content. We really appreciate you, and we could not do this without you. Today, we have a very, very special guest, a very well-known Mason in Northwest Ohio, perhaps for the entire state. A hardworking Mason who has spent most of his life in the craft and has very many stories and a very interesting amount of wisdom to share with us. I would like to proudly introduce my lodge brother, Most Worshipful Brother Charles R. Murphy, who was Grand Master for the state of Ohio during 2009. Welcome to the show, Brother Murphy.
Hey, Sam, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
We've had a pretty fun day so far.
Yeah.
So we'd like to just get straight into the content. Just makes it much easier for the listeners.
Sure.
How long have you been a Mason, roughly?
20, almost 30 years now. I joined in, it's been more than that. I joined in 1991.
1991?
Yes, sir.
I wasn't even born yet.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
I feel like I've known you for pretty much my entire life. You were one of the dad advisors when I was in DMLA, and actually became the governor for a short time while I was still in DMLA.
Right. How, 5 years?
Yeah. And it's been pretty awesome having such an influential guy. You know, when I first met you, I was just this little snot-nosed 12-year-old kid that didn't know who anybody was. And I just remember I came to, I think it was the Browning home that year, and you were there doing something for them. And Chris was like, oh, yeah, he's the Grand Master. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
He's like, he's the guy. So obviously, Genoa Lodge is your home lodge.
Correct.
Has this been your only lodge that you've been a part of?
Yeah, as a primary member, yes. I actually do hold a primary membership also in a historic lodge in Utah. Yes. But other than that, it's my primary lodge. I do have some honorary memberships, obviously, of which I'm very proud as well.
It's a pretty big honor to have those. I know we just had a good friend of ours become one, and it's a thing. I mean, it's not just a piece of paper.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
To be welcomed in just about every lodge in Ohio.
Well, not every lodge, but
the ones that matter, right?
I didn't say
that. So how did you first learn about Freemasonry?
Through my father-in-law. After I got married, he belonged to the Shriners. I knew he was active in the Shriners. And he would go out and do his little shrine stuff. He actually belonged to the motorcycle escort, had this motorcycle, and I thought it was pretty cool. And so I said, boy, that's great. How do you become a Shriner? And he said, well, there's a process. And first you need to be a Mason. And I said, what's a Mason? Because I had not heard of the Freemasons at that time. And he explained a little bit about it to me. And he was a great mentor for me as I became active in Freemasonry and ultimately Shrine and some other bodies as well. So he was a past master here at this lodge too.
Of course. Don Harrington.
Yep.
I remember Don.
Yeah.
He was another guy that came to our DMLA stuff all the time.
Yep.
He was a great guy.
He was, yep. Quite an inspiration.
Yes, absolutely. So would it be fair to say that the Shrine kind of was what got you interested in joining?
Well, it had the visibility that the Masons didn't have in my life up to that time. The interesting thing was, after I joined, and I started to become active, and I became active in the Scottish Rite, the Valley of Toledo at that time, and became, once I joined there was a 14th degree ring, and I recognized the 14th degree. And my dad had passed away, and had the 14th degree ring in his effects. So I said, I know my dad wasn't a Freemason. I just know he wasn't. And then I looked, and it was inscribed on the inside, and it said, Valley of Toledo, Charles R. Murphy, which is my name, January 20th, 1920.
That's spooky.
So it was my great-grandfather and it was his ring. And my dad was not a Mason, and neither was his dad. So it just kind of stayed in the family, and now my son has that ring.
That's awesome. Very similar situation. My great grandfather was a Mason. My grandfather was a Mason, but really probably only because Grandpa wanted him to be one. I don't think he ever went to a meeting after Great Grandpa passed away, but I have all of their stuff, and he was like, "Oh, you joined? Well, here you go," and he gave me all the stuff.
That's great.
I'm like, "Well, where'd this come from?" "Oh, your great grandfather was in there." "Oh," and actually, I have his my great grandfather's Scottish Rite ring. My grandfather gave that to me on the day of my graduation from college.
Oh, that's cool.
Handed it to me. He was my grandfather was not a man of words, did not like, I think he hugged me twice in my entire life.
Wow.
It just was him, but he walked up, shook my hand, and then there's this huge diamond Scottish Rite ring in my hand, and I'm like, he's like, "You've earned the right to wear that." And I'm like, "Grandpa, I'm not even in Scottish Rite." He's like, "Put it on." Okay.
That's awesome. I think over the years we've been our biggest enemy in many ways because we have never flashed the fact that we're Masons. It's just, when we do charitable work, we do it behind the scenes. We don't, tout our own the things that we do to help others. And so a lot of people don't know. And that's why I think we go generations sometimes. And then all of a sudden it crops up again. And like what you went through and what I went through, and it makes for a great story. It also tells a story of the history of our organization in a way. Absolutely.
Actually, it's funny you say that. Brother Taylor, and during his interview, had this big, long discussion with one of his the person he looked up to in Masonry, and how long it took his mentor to join because he never asked. His dad was a Mason, and he just was, when is he going to join? Well, he hasn't asked me yet. He didn't know. And
right.
It was very hush-hush back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of crazy, like you said, that we don't really tout these good things we do. We do them because they're the right thing.
Right. And a lot of times I hear people say things like, "Oh, it's a secret society." Well, obviously it's not. I mean, I have the square and compasses on my car, on my license plate. We have it on the front of our building. It's not a secret. We have things that are private. But so does Coca-Cola. They have a private recipe. That doesn't mean they're a secret society. So
share the recipe with you. You just got to come ask us.
Right. Exactly right.
So what is your favorite thing about Masonry? What keeps you going? You're a very active Mason. I think the last time you and I talked about it, you pretty much have a Masonic event pretty much most of the week.
Pretty much every day, yeah. I think it's what keeps me going is the brothers, hanging out with the brothers. And you always learn something new about people when you hang out with them. And even if you know them very well. And the ability to share things together. I love traveling with brothers and going to other lodges and seeing what other lodges are doing. And maybe if you see what others are doing, you might be able to improve yourself too. And and I've stolen a lot of things with permission that have worked elsewhere. And I thought, oh, wow, this is something we can implement here and make it effective. And my term as Grand Master was that way. I took things from Wisconsin. I took things from Maine and from other jurisdictions. But they were things that worked and hadn't been done here. And they ended up being pretty successful here, too.
Well, there's nothing wrong with changing things.
Right.
You have to always be willing to change. We're not talking about bending the whole fabric of what makes this happen. We're talking about making little changes that affect things.
Absolutely. And we're not changing the character of the organization at all. We're changing the way we do things sometimes. And, society is changing around us. And if we don't adapt, and I wouldn't even call it changing, I'd call it adapting. Because we're not changing who we are. We're not changing what we do. But we're adapting to the society around us. And I think if you don't do that, you're going to die.
Well, and it's a strange new world when it comes to technology. I mean, there's guys on TikTok right now that are pretty much sharing all of our secrets, and they're sharing them in the worst possible way. And the only way to combat that without Because we both know you get into a conflict with these guys, they just take what you say and they spin it around and they flip it in a circle. And at the end of the day, you still sound like an idiot.
Right. And they're not showing the whole story anyway. They're showing bits and pieces, what they want to show. And, you can turn anything, even in church or whatever, and make it sound like the devil's work if you only use bits and pieces of what's happening. And it's too bad, but I think every organization has detractors. We're not alone in that fact. So
we're not unique. We just get some of the special ones.
Well, and I think a lot of that's because we're larger than most, and we've been around as long as anyone can remember. So,
and that's fair. And the only way to combat those kinds of minds is to put our own good stuff out into the world.
Absolutely. Continue to do the charitable work. Continue to give baskets to widows at Christmas without our name on them. They just show up at their door. I mean, that's the type of thing that keeps us going, even though we don't tell everyone we do that. I think most people know we're the ones who do that, all that stuff.
And like you said earlier, we don't do it because we expect something from it. We do it because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. If we expected something, we'd tell everybody about it and try to, let them know this is what we're doing. But yeah, exactly.
So you joined Masonry, and then did you go straight into the Shriners?
No. In fact, I joined Lodge, as I said, in 1991. I was raised, and then got a job switch and moved to Maryland in July. So, and I lived there for 3 years. And it was when we came back in 1994, Genoa Lodge was having their 125th reconsecration. And I had maintained my membership, although I had only been to Lodge a couple of times before moving out of town. And my father-in-law, Don, said, hey, your lodges, he didn't belong to this lodge at that time. He belonged to Boaz Lodge, 669 in Toledo. And he said, your lodge is having a reconsecration. Let's go. I said, what's a reconsecration?
I don't know.
Yeah. He said, come on, we're going to go. It's your lodge. And I went, and I started coming back to Lodge, and then ended up the following year going in as a steward here in the Lodge. And that's when I joined the Shrine also. So it was about 5 years later, 6 years later.
And then are there any other bodies that you're currently a part of?
Yeah, well, I'm a past presiding officer, past thrice master of the Ballet Toledo, and I'm also past commander-in-chief of Valor the Firelands, dean of the Royal Schofield Society. I think that's the thing that's taking most of my time right now, and it's so rewarding. I absolutely love it. It's helping guys to explore their own Masonic identity and how they relate to Freemasonry and how Freemasonry impacts them, and seeing light bulbs go off in guys when they go through the Royal Schofield Society it really excites me.
And for our listeners out there that may not have any idea what the Royal Schofield Society is, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's in 2019, it was voted on by the members of the Grand Lodge of Ohio to be formed, actually, as the premier educational society of the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So at the time, before that, I had been chairman of the Grand Lodge Education Committee, and so I kind of moved from that to take over the Royal Schofield Society. And it's a series of 3 different curricula types, I suppose you could call it. The first ones being more automated, then getting into some traveling and some self-introspection and some comparing of different types of Freemasonry and models. And I think everyone gets a different experience out of it, which is what's so exciting.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I myself am going through it, and so is our quality engineer, Brother Turco. And we've kind of been bouncing ideas back and forth. We're both working on different parts, sometimes the same parts. And it's like, well, what do you think about this? Well, I think this. And I'll tell you, it has been, I've been a Mason for 10 years now. And I think it's one of the first times that I actually had to sit down and think about what this fraternity means to me.
Yes.
Not just I love my brothers. I love everything about that. But the symbology, the the code, just sitting down when you have to sit down and formulate a thought and put it on paper and look at other Masons' opinions of how this works, and then formulate a critical thought of, do I agree with this guy? Do I disagree with this guy? And now I have to put it on paper.
Right.
And then I have to give that to somebody to read. And I feel like every time I turn something in, I feel like I'm that kid in high school that's like, ooh, what grade am I going to get on this test?
Right.
And every time it's been great. I get all this critique, great job. It's very encouraging. And I've seen names that I have heard before, but now I'm seeing them on paper of guys that are reading my stuff. It's just been a fantastic experience. And I feel like as I started to do it, I was like, maybe I'll do the first part. And then I did the whole first part in one night.
Right.
And then I did the other half of the second part in one night too. And I'm like, whoa, this is addicting. And it's got that ADD part in my brain scratching, gotta get this done. So,
well, it's interesting. It's really taken off too, considering the fact that it's 2024 now, and it was only established in 2019 in October. So it's been really 4.5 years since it was established. And we have 920 guys in the Grand Lodge of Ohio who have signed up for this program. And we have only out of those 920 so far, 50 who've actually completed, with others on their way. It's not an easy task. It takes time. And if you go in thinking you're going to get it done in one night, you can get the first section of the first of the 3 sections done, but the others take quite a deal more time. Yes.
Quite impressive here at Genoa. We currently have 3 that have completed.
We do, of the first 50. Yep.
Which is very cool. And we have their certificates are hanging right above the door for everyone to see. And we're quite proud of it.
Yeah, kind of like a wall of honor almost, or something. Yeah.
It's really cool. It's one of the first things that I've seen. We've had the education type things before where they're like, oh, do the code, do this, do that.
Right.
I was not interested in any of that. But the way that the Royal Schofield Society does it, I'm having fun doing it.
Yeah, and what we wanted to do differently is the code is set up. Everything's already written out. You just have to learn it, memorize it, understand it. That's fine. But what the Royal Schofield Society does is it's your thoughts and it's your experiences that are going into it, not reading and memorizing something else. And I think that's not only what makes it unique, but I think that's what makes it kind of addicting too at the same time.
Like I said, it scratches an itch in my brain that just makes me want to keep doing it. I think I did. I think I just turned in 3 pieces of it the other day, and I got them done in a week because I was so enthusiastic about getting it done.
That's wonderful.
So other than being with the Royal Schofield and Blue Lodge, are you a member of the Scottish Rite?
Yes, as I had mentioned, I'm past thrice potent master of the Valley of Toledo and past commander-in-chief of the Valley of the Firelands. So I've served both valleys, both local Northwest Ohio valleys as an officer.
And I take it you enjoyed your time going through.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's another very cool one. One day I hope to have someone from the Scottish Rite come on and do a whole episode about the Scottish Rite because it's very interesting.
That'd be great. And I'll tell you, I have some thoughts about some people who may be good ones to talk to if you're interested. So let me know.
Fantastic. I'll have to get those numbers from you. So do you have a Masonic hero or idol that you looked up to?
My father-in-law.
Absolutely no questions asked.
As he was a man of character, a man of principle, a hard worker, and in my opinion, set the example of what people should be. And the fact that he was a Mason is one of the things that cemented in my mind that I wanted to follow in his footsteps in that regard. So there are many that I admire and have loved over the years. And but really, if as my mentor or as my hero, I would have to choose him, yes.
I think that's a fantastic choice. Well, listeners, we are going to take a quick moment to go to refreshment, and when we return, Brother Gabriel will be finishing this interview. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, craftsmen, to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. Thank you for rejoining us. Joining us again is Most Worshipful Brother Charles R. Murphy. Welcome back, Brother Charlie.
Thank you, Gabe.
We really enjoy having you on the podcast, and it's been really nice having someone who both Brother Wilburn and I consider as a star of Masonry share some really wonderful insights and some really great info on some amazing education events for us. It's really an honor having you in our lodge, but it's also nice being able to use you as kind of a sounding board for some of our new ideas compared to your experience in the fraternity and how you think it blends with how it would still serve the fraternity, but also be good for a changing face for the fraternity.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. That's kind of you to say that, Gabe. But I must say, I'm the one who feels fortunate to have you guys coming in because as we age, we know that we're going to be turning the reins of the fraternity over to someone. And, we're not going to be around forever. So we want to make sure we have young, engaged guys who know what they're doing, who have passion for the fraternity, to turn it over to when we're no longer here. And so I'm the one who's honored. And although I thank you for saying that, I'm the one who's honored more than you, I believe.
Well, I really appreciate that, brother. So we've talked at length about some of the current Masonry activities that you do, some of how Brother Wilburn and I have come to know you and been with you in lodge, but you've been a Mason for almost 3 decades now, right? Over 30 years.
It sounds so long, Gabe.
Well, it comes with the territory of having a lot of Masonic experience.
I guess so.
But that's a lot of Masonic travels and Masonic experiences to have for one person, isn't it?
I suppose. I think that anyone has the ability to do all those travels if they really want to and are really engaged. And I've taken advantage of the opportunities. And I must say, I was fortunate, although my wife is now deceased, sadly. She was 100% supportive of everything I did too. And actually, she'd look at me sometimes and say, "Don't you have somewhere else to go?" So I was really fortunate that I had the ability and the opportunity to do those things and travel.
So when you first became a Mason, what was the fraternity like? Was it much different back then, or pretty much comparable to how it is now?
Well, I guess you'd have to define different. No, I mean, the principles are still the same. The faces have changed to a degree, but the principles are still the same. Our tenets are still the same. That's the thing about Freemasonry, is it hasn't changed as far as we can tell in history in that regard. So, no, it hasn't changed at all. Has it changed a lot? Yes, it has. It depends upon your perspective. And, as I said earlier, I think we're in a continual need to adapt to the society around us. And that doesn't mean changing who we are, but it does mean adapting to the way we do things, how we perceive things, how we, interact with others. So, yeah, yes and no. Is that a good answer?
No, that's a very good answer. It's a very broad stroke way of looking at it. But it's nice to have that perspective on it, especially for the perspective of someone who has lived through the fraternity longer than Brother Wilburn and I have, whereas we are seeing it just from our current context. You've seen it for a much longer time than we have now, and you can say, yes, we've been through changes, but nothing is very different. The faces and the people have changed, and some of the modes of communication have changed, but nothing much has changed.
Right, and I would say, it depending upon how you look at it, we could say that Grand Lodge, Ohio has changed more in the last 30 years than it changed in the previous 170 years, because we've changed the way we've done things. But a lot of that, again, is changing the way things are done, but not changing who we are or what we stand for.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very interesting point and a very conscious thing to have in our minds as we go forward in the future in the fraternity. But again, turning the clock back a little bit, to your start in the fraternity. Do you remember some of your early officer positions, some of your early friends in the fraternity, some of your first experiences in the fraternity?
Oh, sure. I traveled a lot. I loved traveling a lot to other lodges, as I said earlier, and I would get out into the adjacent districts and meet guys in the 5th District and the 10th District and the 16th District, and I feel at home in all those districts, like they're my home districts as well. And of course in the 11th District. And over the years, there are people who you like to travel with, and you start going different places with them. You have the same observations, and you can bounce things off them. Sadly, the ones that I traveled with at the beginning, they're all deceased now. There, of course, Don Harrington and Don Carrasca and Frank Lubig. We used to run around together and go to lodges and all over the district, hundreds and hundreds of inspections across Northwest Ohio. And but, the side of time has taken them away. And so now I still love to travel, but I have new traveling companions now. So, when I'm gone, they'll find new traveling companions, I'm sure. So, because they're a lot younger than I am.
Well, I'm glad that you still have such fond memories of your past history in the fraternity and such fond memories of your brothers who have unfortunately gone before us. But hopefully, as is the goal of this podcast, we can continue to reach listeners and continue to have you back maybe for a memorial for Brother Don Harrington.
That'd be great.
So for the listeners who have been paying attention, a lot of us have been referring to Brother Charlie Murphy here as Most Worshipful Brother Charlie Murphy.
Okay.
Can you remind us, for those of us who have forgotten, what your year as Grand Master was and what that was really like for you?
Well, it was, so when I was elected Grand Master, there were 110,000 Masons in Ohio, and it was quite an honor to be elected to that position. And there's really nothing like it that I've ever experienced in my life, but it's more than just that last year. Becoming Grand Master in Ohio, at least, generally you end up spending 7-8 years prior to that in positions of increasing responsibility to prepare for that year. And so there's really not one thing that I could point to other than an accumulation of experiences and an accumulation of, I don't know if knowledge is the right word, but experiences.
Well, thank you, Brother Murphy. I really appreciate the insights for your time in the Grand Lodge. For those listeners who may be interested, can you describe to us maybe what some of the duties of Grand Lodge are, or what your time spent in Grand Lodge was really like, or some memorable faces from your time in Grand Lodge?
Well, as a Grand Lodge officer, there were thousands and thousands of memorable faces, and each one of them has played an important part in my life and my experience. So it's hard to single anyone out in particular. But the Grand Lodge of Ohio, and I assume most of the other Grand Lodges are the same way, is a governing body for the Masons of Ohio. So since each Mason belongs to a lodge or joins a lodge, they might belong to multiple lodges, but every lodge has its own character, and every lodge is its own governing body, and the worshipful master of the lodge runs the lodge without question. I mean, he is the ultimate authority. But sometimes, it's like a game of telephone. If you have a word go from one person to another, to another, to another, things can change over time. So what the Grand Lodge of Ohio really does as the governing body, they just make sure everyone stays within the same bounds, pretty much. And that's really their job, is to govern the lodges, make sure they're not getting goofy or going in some direction that is not positive for the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So really that's all that it is a governing body.
And the Grand Lodge also has some good educational resources and some good code resources, and can help make sure that lodges are in contact with the right advisor and
Absolutely.
The right district deputy, all of that nature.
Yep, absolutely.
For instance, the Grand View widget for Grand Lodge, which has all of our code, all of membership rosters for lodges. That's a very good tool for the members to use, a good modern day tool for Masons to have in communication and technology.
Yeah, and we've had transitions over the last few years, and I believe I don't remember the exact year, but let's say 20 years ago, we had no central membership database at all, except all the paper documents were sent into the Grand Lodge, and the Grand Lodge kept track of all the paper documents of every single member. And then I forget what year it was, but then I guess it would have been probably around 2005-ish or so. We contracted with a firm out of New York called Mori, which is Masonic Online Resource Interface. And we used Mori for several years. And then, I don't remember, I guess it was 2019 maybe or 18, we switched over to Grandview. And I was very familiar with Mori. I'm a little less familiar with Grandview, but I've become familiar with Grandview with some of the administrative stuff I do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for informing our listeners about some of the good aspects of Grand Lodge. And it's always nice to have the experience of a Grand Line officer in our lodge to help kind of keep us on the right track.
Well, if I can keep you guys on the right track, I'm doing something right.
Well, so that has to be quite the feather in your cap of Masonic achievements, is having the purple of the fraternity leadership on your apron. But there has to be some other events in your life in the fraternity that you're proud of as well.
Oh, numerous ones. And I think everybody has those types of events in their life. I remember when I first joined, probably the most memorable thing about my degrees, when I was taking my degrees, is that I did not do all my degrees in this lodge room, in Genoa Lodge. I was a member of Genoa Lodge, but I had just gotten my entered apprentice degree, and God love him, you probably wouldn't even recognize the name. He's been gone for a while now, but Associate Grand Chaplain Israel R. Bud Putman came to our lodge and said, hey, Sherwood Lodge, number 620 in the 5th District, needs an inspection candidate for the fellowcraft degree. You think Murphy's ready? And my father-in-law, Don, looked at him and said, Bud, he will be. So I was ready, and went and I did my fellowcraft degree in a different district. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really started to love traveling and meeting these other brothers, and since that time, I am now an honorary member there at Sherwood Lodge and get there whenever I can. But it's that history that deviates a little bit from the standard, but it's all the same everywhere you go. But different people and different experience.
Well, I really like that. You, much like myself, have a family member on a lodge roster, don't you? Because
my son?
Yes,
I do.
Because I have my father, you have your son.
Yes, I do. My son Price, he's a member here of Genoa Lodge. He lives in North Carolina now, but he's visiting lodges out there, and he's actually gotten my nephew-in-law, who lives in North Carolina, interested, and he just became an entered apprentice himself as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you think you might travel down to North Carolina for the Master Mason degree?
If I'm able, I'd like to. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff going on right now with my job and some other things that are kind of time commitments. But if I can, I told him I would be there if I can.
That sounds wonderful. And we always love seeing Price. We were sorry to see him go, but we know that time commitments for job, and especially an out-of-state job, is quite the endeavor. So we always wish the best for him, and we love hearing from him when you're on a phone call.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I do too.
So we're going to start tying into closing parts of the interview, because this has been an amazing interview. And Craftsman, we hope you've really enjoyed the interview. What we like to do here on the podcast is really leave the listeners with good tips of knowledge like you have, but also something to leave for the future and to get them thinking about. So one of the things we like to ask our guests is, if you could change something about the fraternity. Not like we've been discussing, not what we do, not the craft work that we do, but something that the fraternity may be lacking in, something that the fraternity may do a little bit in an odd sort of way or a less efficient way. What do you think that could be? Like one thing that you could change for the betterment of the fraternity?
Well, I can't change it, but I think it's something that needs to be changed if possible, and that's our visibility. I don't think we have the visibility in all of our communities like we should. Genoa is one example, maybe not typical, though, because we have a decent presence here, but in all our communities, we don't. We still tend toward being secret or not telling people we're Freemasons. Some people do. And it's frustrating to me because I think it's, we spread light to people. We help people. We're there to be charitable and to benefit society. And a lot of people just don't know that. So we have dwindling members as a result, a dwindling membership. And I think if we were more visible in our communities sometimes, and I don't mean taking credit for the stuff we do, but just getting out in the community and proudly saying, oh, I'm a Freemason, this is why I do this. Or when we stop and help someone at the side of the road whose car may be stopped, say, oh, here, I'm a Freemason, what can I do to help you? I know in all my travels, whenever I go places and stay in a hotel, I have little cards that I would always leave with a $5 bill for the cleanup people who clean up the hotel rooms, just to let them know I'm a Freemason. Here, I appreciate what you do. So I just don't think we do that often enough. Let people know, hey, I'm a Freemason. That's why I'm helping you.
Well, I really like that because that's something that I've been trying to improve on. I mean, everyone in my guard unit knows that I'm a Mason. Everyone at work knows that I'm a Mason because I like to show the good character that this fraternity stands for. And I agree with you very much that that's what we need to be doing everywhere, not just in lodge. The closing of these interviews generally are words of wisdom from the guest.
You have the wrong person here for that.
Most worshipful, your humor is always top notch. I guess that comes with age.
Oh, thanks, Gabe. Maybe you'll get there eventually. Then.
Eventually. So if you were to someday, long in the future, see a Mason who is just starting his degrees, or someone out in the world of good character who might consider investigating Freemasonry, what advice would you like to tell that future Mason or that future prospective Mason? What words of Masonic wisdom would you leave for them?
Embrace the fraternity and all that it has to offer. Sometimes we come into not only this, but in our daily lives, we go into things with preconceived notions. We go into things looking at it from our own perspective rather than from the perspective of an open mind. And I would say keep an open mind, enjoy every minute of it, embrace every moment you have, get out and visit others whenever you can, because you'll see that, and my son Price was telling me this, the degree work in North Carolina, basically identical. They have words that are different. Of course, they talk funny there too, but wait, is this being recorded? But they, basically you can go anywhere in the world and the degree is the same. I remember back when I was president of the district, this was back in the 1990s, president of 11th Masonic District, we decided to have an Arabic degree at the Heatherdowns complex, which is no longer a Masonic facility as it was at the time. But and we had about 300 brothers come, and we brought in a lodge from Detroit that does all its degrees in Arabic, and they did the Master Mason degree, the entire thing in Arabic. And I'll tell you what, everyone afterwards, and we had a ethnic meal beforehand, and then did the Arabic degree, and it was all in a foreign language, but we knew every word they were saying because They did the same thing that we did, just in a different language. And boy, what kind of brotherhood is there that can unite people like that from across the world? Especially today with all the strife that's going on in our world, we have all sects, all religions, all types of people in our organization. And I know of no other organization that can unite the world better than Freemasonry can. So we need to keep an open mind and an open heart and embrace what Freemasonry has to offer.
I really like that. That's especially for current times, that's very powerful words. In our closing, most worshipful, Brother Wilburn, Brother Turco, and I, we know you. We really like you as a brother and as a friend. We know what to expect from you. If you could give Masons in the future an idea of who you were as a Mason and who you were as a man, or what you would like to be known for as a Mason and a man, what would you say to those future Masons?
Upholding the integrity of the fraternity and of myself.
Very choice words. Well, thank you, Brother Murphy. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you, Brother
for the
Clausen.
time.
Brother
Thank
Wilbur.
you for the wisdom. Once again, craftsmen, thank you for listening to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. This has been your host, Brother Wilburn, and your co-host, Brother Fawcett. We really appreciate all the likes, listens, and comments on our social media and streaming channels. If you can find it in your heart or within the length of your cable tow to keep giving us comments, suggestions, liking, and watching our content, we'd really appreciate it. Always remember, brothers, to keep an open mind and have an attentive ear.
Also, brothers, always remember, craftsmen, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
All of the views and opinions on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio or any of its jurisdictions. The opinions reflect only those of the hosts and guests.